By sunrise, the capital was already burning. Smoke curled above the streets, threading through empty avenues. And no one could explain why. The remnants of the night lingered everywhere. Chairs overturned. Banners shredded. Confetti lay soaked in the remnants of spilled coffee and rain. The echoes of chants had vanished, leaving a hollow silence. A lone figure stood at the edge of the abandoned rally stage. The kind of man who demanded attention even when the crowd was gone. The Trump-style magnate. Eyes sharp, jaw tight. Hands clenched around a folder no one else was supposed to see. The file was heavy with implication. Every page smelled of risk, of betrayal, of whispers that should never have reached daylight. He flipped through it slowly. Not from caution. From disbelief. There were names. Dates. Secrets written in plain ink but hidden between the lines. Connections that no one had pieced together. And somewhere deep inside him, a spark ignited. Fear. No. Recognition. This changes everything, he murmured. But the real story hadn't even started. Across town, in a dimly lit office that smelled of stale coffee and ambition, the MTG-style strategist appeared on a cracked video screen. Eyes sharp, hair pulled back like a whip. Her presence alone commanded attention, even through the flickering pixels. "We've lost the alliance," she said. "Everything is fractured. The foundation, it's crumbling." The magnate's hand hovered over the file. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Streetlights flickered. A single door clicked. The file wasn't just papers. It wasn't even secrets. It was a fuse. A spark that, once lit, could ignite a chain reaction the country wasn't ready for. The crowds had vanished. But the echoes remained. Whispers of betrayal. Of misdirection. Of deals made in shadows. Of truths that would shock the nation if anyone dared to reveal them. You know this feeling. The sudden vertigo when the ground beneath your feet is no longer solid. The moment you realize that loyalty can be fragile. That alliances can crumble overnight. That power, no matter how absolute it seems, is always provisional. And somewhere, unseen, someone was watching. Counting. Waiting. A smile half hidden in darkness. Timing. Patience. Control. The magnate closed the file slowly. A single thought pierced the silence like a knife. What happens next will change everything. He stepped away from the stage. The wind carried whispers of a story not yet told. The city shivered. The movement shivered. And the world, unknowingly, braced itself. He wasn't born to power. He was born to attention, but not respect. In a cramped apartment above a diner on a nondescript street, he learned early that the world listened, but rarely understood. His mother, sharp-tongued and relentless, ran the diner like a battlefield. Orders shouted. Plates clattering. She called him loud before he could even read. And he took it as both accusation and instruction. The first scar wasn't on his face. It was in his mind. A humiliation from a playground fight he couldn't win. A lesson etched, influence matters more than truth. By the time he was 10, he had already built invisible walls. Walls of bravado. Walls of performance. Walls that kept him safe from disappointment, and close enough to ambition to learn its taste. You've seen this before. The child who learned to negotiate before learning to listen. The boy who measured people not by who they were, but by what they could do for him. And yet, beneath the performance, there was a private fear. A fear he rarely acknowledged. A fear that loyalty could vanish overnight. A fear that the walls he built could collapse. Even as a teenager, he dreamed bigger than his circumstances. Highways at night called to him. City lights reflected in his eyes as he imagined towers rising, not just in steel, but in influence. Late-night TV flickered against his bedroom ceiling, shaping the cadence of ambition he would carry for decades. He carried contradictions like metals. Charm and aggression. Confidence and insecurity. Ambition without restraint. And yet, something in him was shifting. He didn't know it yet, but the world was beginning to mirror his contradictions. In that formative period, the first allegiances formed. Friends, rivals, mentors, some real, some fleeting shadows. He learned how loyalty could be bought, borrowed, or broken. And how an alliance could collapse before anyone noticed the cracks. The MTG-style strategist entered his orbit years later. Brilliant, uncompromising, fearless. Their bond was magnetic but volatile. Together, they navigated the unspoken rules of influence. But the foundation was already fragile. There was one detail almost no one saw. A pattern emerging, subtle yet undeniable. A propensity for loyalty to bend. A hunger for control that could turn allies into enemies overnight. He walked past the diner now, decades later. The smell of burnt coffee and fried eggs triggered memory, sharp, visceral, grounding. And he knew, every choice, every alliance, every betrayal traced back to this beginning. Something was coming. Something that would test him, and everyone around him, in ways the city could never anticipate. And deep inside, a whisper he could barely admit. He just didn't know what was coming. At first, everything looked normal. The rallies. The speeches. The smiling faces caught on camera. Everything rehearsed, everything controlled. Then came a single detail. A name in a document. A timestamp that didn't match. And suddenly, the illusion began to crack. The Trump-style figure sat in the dim light of his private office. Screens flickered across the room, news feeds rolling endlessly. A single email arrived. Not marked urgent. Not dramatic. But it carried a quiet, insidious weight. It read, "They're not with you anymore. The alliance has fractured." He stared at it, frozen for a beat. Then, slowly, recognition dawned. The cracks spread quietly, invisible to the casual observer, but lethal if ignored. The MTG-style strategist appeared on a secure line. Her voice, sharp as glass, broke the silence. "You think you understand the players. You don't. You never did." At first, he wanted to dismiss it. Denial is easier than confrontation. But denial rarely stops reality. Outside, the streets hummed with oblivion. Drivers, commuters, children heading to school, none of them aware the ground had shifted beneath them. The media would call it chaos, but chaos is rarely sudden. It's engineered. Layered. Built quietly over time. Expectations were disrupted. Supporters questioned their loyalties. Opponents seized the smallest misstep. And everywhere, someone asked, who really controls the definition of normal? The first mini-twist arrived in a private meeting. One of his trusted lieutenants revealed a decision he hadn't authorized. A small betrayal, or perhaps a prelude. The figure clenched his fists. The real danger, he muttered to no one, isn't change. It's who writes the rules. The tension rippled outward. Allies began whispering to each other in the shadows. Plans shifted, meetings rearranged, alliances reevaluated. The movement he thought unbreakable was now a house of mirrors. Every reflection distorted, every loyalty questioned. And yet, the real storm hadn't hit. It was approaching. Slow. Inevitable. A cognitive loop few noticed, every attempt to fix the cracks only widened them. He walked the empty corridors of his office late at night. The lights flickered. A door clicked. Somewhere, a faint laugh echoed. The city didn't notice. The country didn't notice. But he did. You've asked this question too, when does loyalty end? When does ambition consume even those closest to you? Screens lit up across the nation. Voices sharpened. No one agreed on what was real anymore. And in that moment, he understood the truth. The alliance was not just fractured. It was awakening. Not in unity, but in chaos. And the first choices he made now would define not only the future of his movement, but the perception of power itself. Something whispered in the shadows. What he found next changed everything. The truth didn't shout. It whispered. Buried in layers of protocol, paperwork, and political theater. The Trump-style figure had thought he understood the rules. He had believed loyalty, charisma, and influence were enough. But what they called loyalty was transactional. What they called freedom was quiet dependency. What they called control was curated chaos. He stared at the data on the screen. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. Connections no one else noticed. Influences quietly manipulating the outcome of every decision, every vote, every alliance. And here's the part almost no one saw. The fractures weren't mistakes. They were engineered. Every betrayal, every rumor, every misstep, calculated to test endurance, measure reactions, and determine who would survive. The MTG-style strategist's voice arrived again, calm but piercing. They wanted to see how far you'd go before breaking. They wanted to watch the empire you built crumble, or bend. Paradox hung in the air like smoke. He was powerful, yet powerless. Visible, yet invisible. Master of influence, yet manipulated. The city outside seemed to move in slow motion. Traffic lights cycled. Horns honked. Screens glared. No one noticed the puppet strings above them. There was a single phrase that echoed louder than any alarm. The real danger isn't in change. It's in who controls the definition of normal. He began to connect the dots. Every alliance that fell. Every whisper that traveled the halls of power. Every media cycle that spun narratives in his favor, and against him. It was all part of a system bigger than any individual, bigger than loyalty, bigger than ambition. And yet, despite the clarity, despite understanding the machinery, the feeling remained. He was not yet defeated. Not yet. Because the system that controlled him also revealed its weakness. Every engineered fracture left a space. Every manipulation left an opening. And every whispered truth carried an opportunity, if he could see it. You felt this once, didn't you? That moment when you realize the forces shaping your world are invisible, omnipresent, and yet imperfect. The paradox settled in. The system could dictate events. It could not dictate how a mind responded. It could not command courage. It could not define insight. And somewhere, behind the digital screens, the reports, the whispers, someone was watching him realize this. Waiting. Calculating. Adjusting. The reveal was complete. The storm had not yet arrived. But the first currents had shifted. And he knew, nothing would ever feel normal again. Screens lit up. Voices sharpened. No one agreed on what was real anymore. The Trump-style figure stood at the window of his skyscraper office, watching the city breathe beneath him. It felt alive. Chaotic. Fragile. Everything he thought he controlled was unraveling. Every ally, every strategy, every promise, tested. Emails, calls, and messages came in waves. Some were frantic. Some were calm. All carried the same undertone: the alliance was breaking. And this time, it couldn't be fixed with charm or intimidation. He could silence a voice. He could bury a truth. But he could not stop a mind that finally learned to question. The MTG-style strategist was relentless. She appeared on encrypted calls, commanding clarity amidst the chaos. You can't fix this by holding on to old rules, she said. Not anymore. Not ever. Pressure mounted. The media spun narratives. Supporters clashed with each other. And the fissures inside the movement became impossible to ignore. The streets outside mirrored the turmoil. Cars honked. Crowds murmured. Phones buzzed. Some celebrated. Some feared. All were pawns in a game bigger than they realized. He felt it in his gut, the identity crisis. Not of politics. Not of ambition. But of self. Every choice, every compromise, every strategy now demanded a reckoning with who he really was, and what he was willing to become. There was a moment, a single, piercing instant, when everything broke open. The walls of certainty collapsed. The illusions of control evaporated. And the raw, unfiltered truth lay before him. Voices inside his head collided with external chaos. The alliance isn't just fractured, it's awakening. And it's awake in ways you cannot predict. The storm didn't roar. It whispered. It nudged. It pressed. It forced reflection. And in the center of it, a single realization. This wasn't about politics. It wasn't about power. It was about people. People who followed. People who betrayed. People who watched from the shadows, waiting for the misstep. He walked the hallways alone, the city lights casting long shadows. The storm was both external and internal. It was a mirror, reflecting ambition, fear, loyalty, and doubt. Somewhere, far above the chaos, a voice reminded him of the truth. You cannot control the storm. You can only decide how you move through it. And as the night deepened, as sirens faded and whispers grew, he understood. This storm would define him. Not for the headlines. Not for history. But for the moment when a mind awakens to its own truth. And maybe, this was the awakening everyone had been waiting for. The storm passed, but its echoes remained. The city breathed again, though subtly altered. Streetlights flickered like cautious witnesses. The hum of life returned, quieter now, heavy with understanding. The Trump-style figure stood alone on the rooftop of his skyscraper. Wind whipped past him, carrying the faint scent of burnt paper, rain, and city asphalt. He looked at the skyline, fractured but beautiful, chaotic but alive. Everything that had seemed certain, had changed. Freedom isn't inherited. It's practiced. He reflected on the alliances lost. The loyalties tested. The truths uncovered. And in that quiet reflection, he realized something deeper. Power alone cannot define meaning. Control cannot define identity. Truth, human truth, comes from the choices we make when everything feels uncertain. The MTG-style strategist appeared one last time on a secure line. No orders. No strategy. Just clarity. You survived the storm, she said. And now, you decide what comes next. He remembered the diner. The city lights. Late-night highways stretching endlessly into darkness. All those formative moments, the scars, the failures, the small victories, they weren't just past memories. They were guides. Anchors. So when your moment comes, what will you choose to become? The city around him began to awaken fully. Commuters. Shops opening. Children laughing in playgrounds. Life returned to its rhythm, but different. Changed. Sharper. Wiser. And maybe, this is where everything begins again. He turned from the rooftop. Not with triumph. Not with defeat. But with quiet understanding. Because the storm had passed, yet its lessons endured. And in that endurance, the possibility of something greater remained. The lights flickered. A door clicked. A new day was coming. And for the first time, he felt ready, not just to survive, but to navigate the truth, the chaos, and the human complexity that awaited. By midday, the city had forgotten the night's whispers. But the figures in power had not. The Trump-style magnate knew the calm was temporary. Storms, he realized, never truly end, they only pause. A new message arrived, sharp and unreadable. The files are leaking. They're reaching beyond control. The MTG-style strategist appeared instantly on a secure line. Her expression, calm as ever, carried an edge of urgency. They're testing you. Testing the alliance. Testing what people are willing to risk. Outside, the streets looked ordinary. Drivers, pedestrians, coffee shops bustling. And yet, invisible threads of influence and manipulation were snapping across the city. Every whisper. Every glance. Every overlooked detail, it mattered. He walked through the empty halls of his private office. Lights flickered above, shadows stretching across the polished floors. He touched the folder, the one that had triggered the storm. Every page a reminder, every alliance had limits. Every loyalty had a breaking point. The first fractures began to show. Allies questioned motives. Supporters grew uneasy. And behind the scenes, old agreements were quietly rewritten, or broken. At first, he tried to maintain control. Speak louder. Move faster. Act decisively. But the cracks had spread too far. And the system wasn't responding to power. It responded to exposure. You've felt this before. The sudden awareness that your grip on reality isn't as strong as you thought. The panic that rises when everyone around you knows more than you do, or acts as if they do. The media caught wind of something. Rumors became reports. Reports became accusations. And the political machinery churned with relentless momentum. He realized a truth no one wanted to admit. The alliance was collapsing from within. Not because of external enemies. Not because of mistakes. But because the very structure they built relied on trust that was never truly earned. Screens lit up. Phones buzzed. Voices demanded answers. Every conversation, every decision, every movement, scrutinized. And somewhere in the chaos, the MTG-style strategist whispered. Control isn't about power. It's about understanding what breaks first, and what survives. He understood. And for the first time, the calm was terrifying. Because he wasn't just watching the alliance fracture. He was part of the fracture. The city outside moved on. Life seemed normal. But the foundations had shifted. And in that shift, a new game had begun. It started quietly. A late-night message. A misdirected call. Nothing anyone else would notice. But he did. The Trump-style figure read it twice. Then a third time. Every word carried a subtle threat, a hidden intention, a whisper of betrayal. The MTG-style strategist watched him from her screen, expression unreadable. You know this feeling, she said. That moment when someone close isn't really close. When loyalty is conditional. When the rules are different than you imagined. Inside the movement, subtle shifts began to fracture trust. A trusted lieutenant suddenly questioned orders. A supporter withheld crucial information. And the whisper network, the hidden communication lines they had relied on, revealed weaknesses they never suspected. There was one small meeting in a downtown office. 4 people. Confidential. A decision made there would ripple across the movement, but no one noticed who wasn't in the room. And that absence was enough. Enough to change everything. He walked the empty hallways of the skyscraper, hands brushing against polished metal railings. You've seen this before, he thought. The slow erosion of power. The quiet betrayal before it becomes impossible to ignore. The city outside seemed indifferent. Commuters. Coffee shops. Morning traffic. But inside, the machine of ambition was grinding against itself. Cracks spreading, unnoticed until they couldn't be ignored. He remembered the diner from his childhood. The sharp tongue of his mother. The playground humiliation. All those lessons about perception, control, and survival, they were resurfacing now, but in a darker, more dangerous form. Micro-twists emerged like sparks in dry grass. A loyal aide revealed conflicting information. A donor shifted allegiance. A policy decision was leaked. And everywhere, the threads of influence tangled into chaos. "You can't fix this with force," the strategist whispered. "You can't command loyalty. You can only navigate it. And sometimes, you survive it by knowing when to let go." He paused, looking out over the city skyline. The sun reflected off the glass towers, sharp, blinding. And he realized, the fracture wasn't just external. It wasn't just political. It was inside. Inside every alliance, every strategy, every promise he had ever made. And that was the danger. Not the enemies he saw. Not the rumors he read. But the ones he trusted. Because trust, once broken, spreads quietly. And the movement, the alliance, the empire, would bend under its own weight if he didn't act. By late afternoon, the city no longer felt ordinary. Sirens punctuated the hum of traffic. Screens flashed breaking news. Every headline seemed to ask the same question. Who really controls the narrative? The Trump-style figure watched from his office, skyscraper glass between him and the chaos below. He thought he knew the rules. He had built his empire believing in loyalty, influence, and a code he could manipulate. But the rules had shifted. A leaked report landed on his desk. The words were simple. The implications, seismic. The alliance wasn't just fractured. It was dissolving in plain sight. At first, the magnitude didn't register. The magnitude of exposure, of scrutiny, of power slipping beyond reach. Then it hit, every move, every statement, every ally under surveillance. The system wasn't responding to force, it was responding to chaos. The MTG-style strategist's calm voice arrived on a secure line. "You've entered a new arena. The old rules are gone. Now, everything you do is public. And everything you do will be interpreted, correctly or incorrectly, by everyone watching." Outside, the streets reflected the tension. News vans parked at every corner. Protesters, supporters, journalists, all unaware they were participants in a carefully engineered test. A single misstep could ignite a cascade. Inside the office, cognitive loops ran unchecked. Every ally questioned loyalty. Every subordinate wondered who could be trusted. Every decision, no matter how small, carried consequences he hadn't anticipated. Microhooks began to appear in the chaos. An aide disappeared for hours. A donor shifted allegiance. A policy proposal leaked, interpreted as a betrayal. And the system, hidden and invisible, watched. It calculated reactions. It measured resolve. And it waited. The paradox was clear. The more he tried to control the storm, the less control he had. The more he clarified, the more confusion spread. And the public, the media, the country, they only saw fragments. The illusion of power became indistinguishable from real power. He paused, staring at the skyline. Lights flickered. A door clicked. The city moved, unaware of the collision of ambition, betrayal, and strategy above. "You've asked this question too," the strategist whispered. "How much can one survive before everything bends? How much can one control when control is a mirage?" The system had redefined the rules. The game had changed. And the alliance, the foundation he thought unbreakable, was now a fragile, shifting terrain. One thought pierced the tension. This isn't about winning. It's about navigating the collapse. The city never slept. But the real conversations happened in silence. Encrypted calls. Hidden meetings. Texts deleted before anyone could read them. The Trump-style figure moved through it all like a ghost, observing, calculating, surviving. The MTG-style strategist appeared again, voice sharp, eyes sharper. "You know the pattern," she said. "The whispers carry more truth than the headlines. And the strategy isn't about power. It's about predicting who will betray first." A series of microdecisions rippled through the alliance. A single aide, overlooked by most, shifted loyalties. A donor quietly funneled resources elsewhere. And a minor policy suggestion became a wedge, driving conversation and suspicion. The magnate read the reports, but the real intelligence came from observation. The subtle stutter in a supporter's voice. The hesitation of a colleague. The unspoken glance in a hallway. Outside, the city moved. Coffee shops. Traffic lights. Children laughing in playgrounds. Oblivious to the invisible currents shaping their leaders' decisions. But he was not oblivious. He was acutely aware that every move was being measured. Every decision analyzed. Every response anticipated. Microhooks emerged constantly. A message intercepted, meaning unknown. A strategy meeting postponed, revealing deeper fractures. A miscommunication that could ignite chaos. He felt it in his gut, the stakes were not just political. They were personal. Every betrayal threatened identity. Every secret could redefine loyalty. Every calculation carried consequences beyond immediate comprehension. The paradox was undeniable. The closer he watched, the less he controlled. The more he calculated, the more unpredictable the outcome became. He paused, leaning against the skyscraper glass. City lights flickered. A door clicked. A shadow moved in the corner of his vision. Was it real, or another layer of manipulation? You felt this before. That moment when you realize every whisper carries weight. Every secret is a weapon. Every decision, no matter how small, ripples outward in ways you cannot see. And yet, amidst the chaos, a plan emerged. Not a plan of dominance, not a plan of coercion. A plan of survival. Of endurance. Of understanding the fractures before they became breaks. The strategist's final words lingered. You cannot stop what is coming. But you can move through it. And sometimes, moving through it is the only victory that matters. The storm had not ended. It had only shifted. And the whispers, silent, precise, invisible, were guiding the next move. By dusk, the movement looked intact. From the outside, perfectly aligned. Flags waving. Cameras rolling. Smiles rehearsed. But inside, the foundation was crumbling. The Trump-style figure paced his office. Every call. Every message. Every report. All pointed to the same truth: loyalty was fracturing faster than he could contain it. A trusted lieutenant had openly questioned strategy. A major donor had shifted influence quietly. And whispers of betrayal had started to echo through hallways, unseen but deadly. The MTG-style strategist appeared on a secure line, calm yet precise. Fissures widen not in moments of failure, but in moments of certainty, she said. Those who were silent will speak. Those who followed will lead. And those who led, will falter. At first, he tried to suppress the tension. Commanded calm. Smiled for the cameras. But the storm inside him matched the storm outside. Each fracture, no matter how subtle, pulled at the edges of control. You've seen this before. The slow erosion of power, unseen until the walls collapse. The quiet betrayals that suddenly seem impossible to ignore. The allies who vanish in plain sight. A micro-twist appeared, a minor policy miscommunication became a flashpoint. Supporters argued. Allies hesitated. The media caught wind. Headlines misinterpreted every nuance. And the fractures deepened. He stopped pacing. Looked out at the city lights. The highways stretched into darkness. The glow of late-night diners reflected off glass towers. All those American images of ambition and struggle, mirrored in the microdrama unfolding within his own movement. The paradox hit him. The more he tried to hold the alliance together, the more it threatened to collapse. The more he demanded loyalty, the more it slipped away. The strategist's words lingered in the air. Control is a myth. Influence is temporary. Awareness is survival. And then, a revelation. Some fissures were intentional. Planted by enemies. Or by those closest, testing his resolve. He couldn't tell. And that uncertainty was the sharpest blade of all. A phone buzzed. A meeting request appeared. The agenda was unclear. But the stakes were obvious, a choice awaited. And that choice would determine not only the loyalty of the movement, but the definition of who he had become. Outside, the city continued to move. Oblivious. But within every flickering streetlight, every passing car, every hum of electricity, was a reflection of the fractures widening above. And he realized, quietly. Sometimes the hardest battles are not with enemies. They are with the ones who were supposed to stand beside you. By nightfall, the movement no longer looked solid. It trembled under the weight of secrets, whispers, and shifting loyalties. Cameras captured smiles, speeches, performances, but behind the scenes, everything was unraveling. The Trump-style figure leaned over his desk. Documents sprawled. Screens blinking. Phones buzzing incessantly. Every report, every leak, every miscommunication pointed to the same brutal truth: trust was evaporating. A high-ranking aide openly challenged his authority. A key supporter withdrew their endorsement in silence. The MTG-style strategist appeared on the secure line, expression as unreadable as ever. The unraveling isn't dramatic. It's subtle. Quiet. Like water seeping through cracks until the foundation collapses. At first, he wanted to fight. He wanted to command, to assert, to hold fast. But the patterns were undeniable. Every move he made triggered reactions he hadn't anticipated. Every attempt to consolidate power only widened the gaps. You know this feeling. The moment when you realize everything you built relies on fragile threads. When loyalty is conditional, ambition unpredictable, and trust a currency you can no longer count on. A minor leak became a flashpoint. Private conversations aired publicly. Allies argued on live feeds. Supporters questioned motives. And suddenly, the cracks were impossible to ignore. He walked through the empty office, the city skyline reflecting off glass towers. Streetlights flickered below. Highways hummed with oblivious traffic. The city was unaware, but he wasn't. He could feel the momentum of collapse swirling beneath the surface. The paradox was sharp. The more power he had, the less control he wielded. The more visibility he demanded, the more chaos grew. And then, a realization. Some of the unraveling was engineered. By enemies. By allies. By the very system he thought he understood. It didn't matter. The effect was the same. Every microdecision now carried weight beyond comprehension. Every whisper could ignite conflict. Every calculated move risked accelerating the collapse. The strategist's words echoed one last time. You can't stop it. You can only navigate it. And survival is understanding when to let go. He stared out at the city, wind cutting across the rooftop. The lights glimmered. The streets were alive. The movement beneath him fractured. And he understood, finally, that the battle wasn't about winning anymore. It was about enduring. And about defining what integrity, and survival, looked like in the ruins of ambition. He stood at the edge of the skyscraper's rooftop. City lights flickered beneath him, reflecting uncertainty in every windowpane. The Trump-style figure knew the movement's fate was no longer just a matter of strategy, it was a matter of choice. A folder sat open on the desk behind him. Inside, options, calculations, and potential betrayals waiting to be activated. One choice would stabilize alliances, at least temporarily. Another would assert dominance, but risk everything he had built. And a third, could fracture the movement beyond repair. He remembered the MTG-style strategist's words from the night before. Survival isn't about power. It's about understanding which fractures to mend, and which to let widen. The paradox was clear. Every move carried consequence. Every decision exposed vulnerability. Every ally was both a lifeline and a liability. He paused. Felt the wind whip past him. He could hear the distant hum of the city, the faint echoes of lives moving forward oblivious to the chaos above. You felt this before. That moment when every possible path seems dangerous. When each choice tests not just ambition, but integrity. When survival depends on clarity, courage, and a deep understanding of human fragility. A minor betrayal had just emerged. A long-time lieutenant had secretly aligned with rivals. The revelation was subtle, almost invisible. But it was enough to force a reckoning. Trust, once broken, spread silently but destructively. The strategist appeared on screen. Her gaze steady, almost unnerving. "You've arrived at the crossroads," she said. "Not the path you want. Not the path you expect. But the path that will define everything." He closed his eyes. The choices lay before him like a chessboard in 3 dimensions. Every move measured in loyalty, risk, exposure. Every decision weighed with history, ambition, and consequence. Outside, the city pulsed. Lights, traffic, late-night diners humming with life. Everything seemed normal. Everything was anything but normal. He opened the folder again. Finger traced a single line, "Choose wisely. Survival depends on it." And in that moment, he realized. The true battle wasn't with enemies. It wasn't with rivals. It wasn't with public scrutiny. It was with the choices he made. And the world, unaware, waited to see which version of him would emerge. The morning started quietly. Coffee brewed. Cars moved along highways. But the empire inside the skyscraper was about to fracture in plain sight. A message arrived, urgent and unmistakable. The betrayal is no longer hidden. The Trump-style figure froze. Every instinct screamed, this would change everything. Allies, once trusted, now stood exposed. Every secret whispered in shadow now faced the harsh glare of the public eye. The MTG-style strategist appeared on a secure call. Her voice calm, but loaded with precision. "Look closely. You'll see who stands and who falls. And some fractures, you cannot mend." The first revelation, a senior lieutenant had secretly aligned with rivals, providing information that destabilized critical decisions. Supporters felt blindsided. Media coverage erupted with speculation. And the cracks, once subtle, were now impossible to ignore. He moved through the office, pacing. Screens flashed with updates. Phones rang endlessly. Every notification carried a paradox: the closer you look, the more uncertain everything becomes. You felt this before. The moment when someone you trusted betrays not out of malice, but necessity. The realization that alliances are fragile, and loyalty is conditional. Another micro-twist emerged. An unexpected supporter publicly questioned his leadership. Allies whispered in hallways. Emails leaked with subtle manipulations. And everywhere, eyes watched, waiting to see the reaction. The paradox tightened around him. The more he tried to control the narrative, the less control he had. The more he sought clarity, the more confusion spread. He paused at the window. City lights reflected off glass towers. A distant siren echoed. And he understood, the movement he had built was no longer just fragile, it was alive, unpredictable, and ruthless in its independence. The strategist's voice returned. Betrayal isn't an end. It's a signal. A mirror. A test of endurance. What you choose now will define not just the alliance, but yourself. He closed his eyes. The weight of exposure pressed down. Every decision, every action, every glance, magnified by betrayal. And yet, within that pressure, a single truth remained. Survival isn't about eliminating betrayal. It's about navigating it. And mastering the storm before it masters you. The city moved outside, unaware. Oblivious. But inside, the empire had shifted. Fractures were now visible. And the path forward was uncertain, perilous, and deeply human. The city had no idea what was unfolding. On the surface, headlines, traffic, coffee shops humming with life. But behind closed doors, everything burned. The Trump-style figure watched screens flicker. Videos of confrontations. Social media posts spinning narratives. Supporters arguing. Allies scrambling. Every micro-moment amplified into public spectacle. A minor misstatement became a headline. A leaked email turned into a scandal. Every whisper, every hesitation, every overlooked detail, magnified, twisted, viral. The MTG-style strategist appeared, calm as always, eyes unreadable. Chaos doesn't just disrupt. It clarifies. It separates those who endure from those who falter. Inside the movement, the cracks deepened. Alliances once considered unbreakable now faltered. Leaders whispered behind closed doors. Subordinates hesitated at critical moments. And trust, already fragile, evaporated like smoke. He felt it, the full weight of consequence. Every choice he made now reverberated across a web he could no longer fully see. Every action had unintended repercussions. Every word, amplified. Every decision, scrutinized. You know this feeling. The sudden clarity that control is an illusion. The recognition that what you thought solid can fracture in seconds. The pressure that demands adaptation faster than thought. Microtwists appeared in real time. A supporter publicly denounced a strategy. A lieutenant's loyalty wavered under media scrutiny. And an unexpected ally surfaced, aligning against him in subtle, strategic moves. The paradox became undeniable. Power created influence, but influence invited chaos. Control demanded certainty, but certainty was now a liability. And the movement, alive and unpredictable, seemed to breathe with a mind of its own. The strategist's voice lingered. Consequences are not punishment. They are mirrors. They show who is willing to adapt, and who will break. He paced, hands gripping polished railing. The city lights glimmered below, distant yet sharp. Every flickering reflection reminded him, every fracture, every betrayal, every public conflict was now part of the story he had to navigate. And then he understood. This chaos wasn't the end. It was the test. Not of power. Not of loyalty. But of endurance. Of perception. Of human resilience in the face of exposure, scrutiny, and relentless pressure. The storm raged on, inside and out. And for the first time, he realized survival wasn't about controlling the chaos. It was about mastering how to move through it, without losing himself. The storm had not yet passed. But he had decided, passivity was no longer an option. The Trump-style figure gathered his inner circle. Not the loyalists who remained unquestioning. Not the aides too afraid to act. Only those willing to navigate chaos with precision. The MTG-style strategist appeared on a secure call, calm but sharp. You don't fight chaos with chaos, she said. You fight it with clarity. With anticipation. And with moves they never expect. The countermove began quietly. Emails crafted with care. Statements timed to redirect narratives. Alliances subtly reinforced, or replaced. Outside, the city continued, oblivious. News feeds buzzed with speculation, but no one guessed the calculations behind the scenes. Every public display was deliberate. Every appearance curated. Every word chosen for maximum effect. A microhook appeared, a minor ally, previously wavering, aligned strategically with him. It was subtle, almost invisible. But it shifted perception. It shifted momentum. He walked the halls of his office, screens reflecting 1,000 possible outcomes. He paused. You've seen this before, that moment when the tide turns, not in a roar, but in a series of precise, invisible adjustments. The paradox sharpened. Power alone could not reclaim what had been lost. Control alone could not repair trust. But insight, anticipation, and relentless attention to the fractures, could shift everything. He initiated a series of discreet communications. Allies were instructed to act, but carefully. Enemies were observed, not confronted directly. And public narratives were guided, not forced. The strategist's voice lingered, a whisper over encrypted lines. Every move you make now must anticipate reaction. Every reaction must anticipate counter. The chessboard is alive. And you are not playing against pieces. You're playing against minds. The countermove spread. Influence regained subtle traction. Microleverage shifted in unseen ways. And the first visible signs of control re-emerged, not through dominance, but through precision, patience, and perception. He paused at the window. The city lights glimmered. He realized, the storm could never be fully controlled. It could, however, be navigated. And in that navigation lay survival. For the first time, he understood. Victory isn't about breaking the chaos. It's about mastering movement within it. And sometimes, the quietest moves speak the loudest truths. The city awoke to headlines. Flashing banners on news apps. Tweets, live feeds, and streaming coverage. The story was out. And it hit like a hammer. The Trump-style figure watched the chaos unfold. The countermove, careful, precise, patient, was now fully visible. And public opinion was erupting. Allies defended. Rivals attacked. Supporters argued. Critics celebrated. The MTG-style strategist appeared on a secure line. Public perception is its own storm, she said. It doesn't bend to strategy. It doesn't yield to force. It only reacts. And your reaction defines you. Microhooks erupted in real time. A minor misstatement magnified into scandal. A leaked memo interpreted as betrayal. A supporter publicly questioned loyalty. And everywhere, the narrative spun, fractured, and collided. Inside the skyscraper, every phone buzzed. Every email pinged. Every whisper carried weight. The paradox was sharp. The more control he exercised behind the scenes, the more chaotic the public front appeared. You've seen this before. The moment when perception becomes reality. When a single leak, a single tweet, a single misstep can outweigh months of careful calculation. The magnitude became clear. The movement was under scrutiny not only from opponents but from the public, the media, and its own members. Every alignment, every fracture, every decision now carried amplified consequences. The strategist's voice cut through the noise. Chaos isn't finished with you. It's testing resilience. It's measuring patience. It's watching for the mind that bends, and the one that breaks. The Trump-style figure stepped back from the desk. Looked out across the city skyline. Lights flickered. Highways stretched endlessly. Every reflection, every shimmer, every shadow reminded him, the battle wasn't over. It wasn't about the alliance anymore. It was about perception, endurance, and the ability to respond under relentless scrutiny. And he understood, finally. Public fallout wasn't punishment. It was revelation. It showed who would remain, who would fracture, and who could navigate the storm without losing themselves. The city moved below, oblivious to the strategic calculations above. But inside, every decision, every reaction, every measured counter, had the weight of survival. And somewhere deep inside, he felt the truth settle. This was the crucible. And he would either emerge tempered, or fractured beyond repair. The night was electric. Every screen, every phone, every whisper poised for reaction. The Trump-style figure had made his choice. And now, the consequences would unfold. The MTG-style strategist appeared once more. You've navigated whispers. You've endured chaos. Now it's time for the decisive strike. Not to destroy. Not to dominate. But to reshape the battlefield. Microhooks sparked like lightning. A carefully timed statement shifted public narrative. A subtle realignment of allies fractured opponents. A single meeting, hidden from all but the closest aides, realigned power in unexpected ways. Inside the skyscraper, every decision was deliberate. Every step calculated. Every conversation, every glance, every word, part of a plan invisible to the outside world. He paused, fingers tracing the edge of the polished desk. You've seen this before. The moment when a single, precise move changes the game entirely. When patience meets timing. When chaos becomes an advantage. The paradox was sharp. Power could not enforce loyalty. Chaos could not dictate outcome. But anticipation, strategy, and understanding human nature, could. Public perception began to shift. Headlines softened. Social media narratives pivoted. Supporters regained confidence. Opponents recalibrated. He walked to the window, looking down at highways lit with headlights. The city seemed ordinary. But it had been forever altered. Every decision, every fracture, every subtle alliance shift had reshaped the landscape. The strategist's voice lingered. Every strike, decisive or quiet, carries weight. And every choice leaves echoes. The battle isn't over, but the path forward is now defined. And he realized, survival isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about mastering the decisive moment. About acting when the world watches, but before it fully understands. The city lights glimmered. A door clicked. The storm had not ended. But the battlefield had shifted. And in that shift, he found clarity, power, and the first true taste of control. Dawn broke over the city. The streets hummed. Life moved forward. And yet, nothing felt the same. The Trump-style figure stood alone in the skyscraper. His reflection stretched across the glass, fractured by light and shadow. The decisive strike had shifted alliances. It had reshaped the battlefield. It had, in subtle but irreversible ways, changed him. The MTG-style strategist appeared, her presence steady, almost ghost-like. Every action carries consequence, she said. Every choice echoes in ways you cannot predict. And the question remains, who do you become when the storm settles? The microfractures lingered. Some allies remained loyal, scarred but steadfast. Others drifted away, embittered or cautious. The public saw headlines. But they couldn't see the nuances, the subtle human calculations, the weight of every decision. He thought back to the diner. To highways at night. To childhood lessons learned in quiet moments. The city outside moved obliviously. Inside, he felt the gravity of survival, trust, and human complexity. You've felt this before. That moment when the dust settles, and you realize the storm has changed you more than it has changed the world. When victory isn't celebrated loudly, but understood quietly. When loss is measured not just in what was taken, but in what was revealed. A minor ally approached him. No applause. No fanfare. Just acknowledgement. A subtle nod. We survived. But the future still waits. He reflected on the paradox. Control had never been total. Chaos had never been avoidable. And yet, through anticipation, precision, and understanding of human nature, he had endured. The strategist's words echoed in his mind. Every storm passes. Every fracture leaves a scar. But the ones who navigate both, leave a legacy. The city breathed around him. Lights flickered in early morning. Doors opened. Cars moved. The world continued. And he understood, finally. Survival is not about power. It is about perception. It is about endurance. It is about choosing who you become when all certainty is gone. The skyscraper, the city, the storm, they remained. But so did he. And for the first time in weeks, he felt the quiet clarity of human resilience. Night faded. The city breathed under the pale glow of dawn. Every street, every diner, every highway reflected light that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. The Trump-style figure stood alone on the rooftop. The storm had passed, or at least shifted. Alliances had fractured. Betrayals had surfaced. Chaos had erupted and been navigated. And through it all, he remained. The MTG-style strategist appeared one last time, voice soft, resonant. Freedom isn't inherited. It's practiced. Every choice you make, every fracture you endure, leaves a mark. Every decision defines who you become in the silence that follows. He thought of the city below. Its lights flickering like memories. Its people moving through lives unaware of the battles fought in shadow and whisper. And he understood, the world didn't pause for strategy, chaos, or betrayal. It demanded presence, clarity, and endurance. Microhooks lingered in memory. The allies who survived. The betrayals that shaped insight. The subtle victories that no one would notice but him. The paradox was complete. Power could not control outcomes. Chaos could not be eliminated. But human resilience, anticipation, and moral clarity could endure. You've seen this before. The quiet moments after upheaval. The reflection that sharpens vision. The realization that survival is not loud, but deeply human. He exhaled. Lights flickered in the skyscraper. A door clicked shut. The storm had passed, or evolved. And in that quiet, heavy clarity, he felt a pulse of something eternal. Not dominance. Not victory. But legacy. Every fracture leaves a lesson, the strategist whispered. Every betrayal teaches endurance. And every storm is an opportunity to redefine who you are. He looked out across the city, winds brushing against the glass. Highways stretched into infinity. Diners glowed softly in the morning. The world continued. And he knew, finally, that survival, resilience, and human wisdom were inseparable. So when your moment comes, what will you choose to become? And maybe, this is where everything begins again.